Hey people, it's another beautiful day, and I'm glad today I'm going to be sharing on how your self-esteem affects your marriage. To each of us, our self-esteem is so important. It's what we believe about ourselves, is how we perceive ourselves, is how we vision ourselves, even before other people do. Is what we believe about ourselves and the kind of things that we say about ourselves all point out to how our self-esteem is. Now, in so many marriages, you'll find out that one or both partners might have a very pessimistic view on life or just a totally insubordinate attitude towards the other, where it seems as though one person just has to constantly dim their light so that the other person doesn't feel offended. In my course of counseling over these years, I found out that many people actually suffer from a low self-esteem. And this does not necessarily mean that we're dealing with a person who is negative or a person who is bad. It's just that there are some times that we've had very negative um, situations in our lives, very negative situations in our lives that have caused us to have a low self-esteem. And many times we don't even know until we get with somebody. And marriage is that perfect place that really shows who you are. I always say it like this, no matter how long you date a person for, you never really get to know who they are until you get married to them. Marriage indeed is an eye-opener. Many people on a very high level suffer a low self-esteem, particularly some of us that have been, I won't use the word unfortunate, but have been in a situation where we have people who have spoken negatively into our lives, people who have constantly talked down on us, people who don't believe in us. Sometimes even parents unknowingly will speak down on their children, not knowing that what they're doing is they're causing this child's self-esteem to be reduced, and it goes on to affect their relationships. I'm going to be reading from my notes because I really want you to understand. It's going to be a very free session. I want to speak from my heart, but also from my notes, just so you have a better understanding of how your self-esteem can affect your marriage. So some of us have gone through trauma, some of us have been bullied, some of us have been abused in several ways: physical abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, emotional abuse. We've had maybe separation or a divorce or a heartbreak. Something has happened to us that has caused us to begin to think very low of ourselves based on how other people have treated us. Now, is it important to think about what your self-esteem looks like? Okay, if you were to draw your self-esteem right now, what would you draw? On a scale of 0 to 10, what would you give yourself? What score would you give yourself? I have a saying that it's so important as a person to reflect on your own self even before other people start to do it. So before somebody even talks down on you, how do you see yourself? Do you talk down on yourself? Do you believe in yourself? Or are you that person who constantly just looks down on yourself? Everything you say about yourself or believe about yourself will affect you in one way or the other. Believe me. What do you say about yourself when nobody's looking as a result of what has happened to you in life? Somebody jilted you, somebody walked away, somebody broke your heart, somebody told lies about you, and you never really got the chance to defend yourself. And here you are thinking very low of yourself. So if you were to draw your self-esteem, what would that image look like? Listen, I want you to begin to see yourself as a whole individual, somebody who's going to somewhere to happen, somebody who has a destiny, somebody who can build, somebody who is here for a reason, somebody who God created with intention. So you're not just here by accident. You need to begin to view yourself positively, because if you don't, it will affect your relationship. What are the signs that we see in marriages today that would indicate that one person or both parties have a low self-esteem? We have somebody who's always playing the victim. No matter what happens, they're always the victims. Even when they're wrong, they're still the victim. They never see anything wrong that they've done, or even always see the other person as an attacker. They might just have a self-esteem. Number two, somebody who gives too much credit. While it's okay to give credit to your spouse, please remember also to give credit to yourself. because you're one reason why the marriage is still working. So if you're constantly giving credit to your spouse without remembering to give credit to yourself, it may be a sign that you might have just a little bit of low self-esteem, and you need to start giving credit to yourself. It takes two to tango. So when it comes to marriage, you can't do it alone, not one person. No matter how wonderful that person is, you also are contributing something to that marriage, and that's the reason it's still working. So please give yourself some credit. Number three, somebody who's always jealous. You have this person who is constantly jealous of the other person, never thinking that that person can make anything of themselves without them being present. It's a sign that they have a low self-esteem. When you're just seeing the other individual as a threat to you, you never see them as an asset. Your spouse is contributing so much to your life, yet you see them as a threat. You're always jealous of them. It's a terrible place to be in, actually, when you're with somebody who's constantly jealous of your achievements or where you're going or the plans that you have or your dreams, rather than seeing that you're an asset. That can be a sign that you have a self-esteem if you're the one feeling that way. And if it's your spouse feeling that way, it's just a sign that they have a very low self-esteem. Another thing is when you're always the one who has to change. Now, marriage requires change. That's perfectly understood. But when you're the one who always has to compromise and change while the other person sticks to their ways, it's actually wrong. You shouldn't always have to change for the other person. They also must be changing at some point. Nobody must be giving and the other person is just receiving all the time. Sometimes you're the one receiving, it's okay. Sometimes you're the one giving, that's okay. But when you're the one who's constantly giving and you have somebody who's always receiving without giving back, then listen, you might have a low self-esteem. Sometimes in marriage, we need to learn to step back so that the other person begins to understand that they can lean towards us. It can be a problem over time, and it can actually lead to resentment where the other person feels, I always have to compromise, I always have to give, I always have to arrange your date nights. I always have to be the one to do this for you. You never really do much. You're always receiving gifts without giving. No. Please step back. It might be a sign that you have a low self-esteem. You should be able to demand from your spouse sometimes. It's all right. We call it marriage. Marriage should not be parasitic at all. Marriage should be a relationship that is mutual blessing, mutual giving, mutual love, mutual respect. That's what makes a marriage tick, and that's what makes a marriage healthy. Now, somebody who's always playing the blame game, somebody who's always playing the blame game could also be an indicator of a low self-esteem. So are you constantly blaming your spouse for everything? You pick on everything. Hey, please check your self-esteem. It's a lot of damage you're doing to your spouse, when you always play the blame game every single time. Be careful. Please be careful. Don't always play the blame game. Be careful what you say. Blaming other people every time without taking responsibility. What was your own part in that situation? What could you also do? You see, having been married for a few years, I've realized that sometimes complaining is just a waste of time. I might as well use that same strength to do something that's productive. I might as well use that same energy that I'm about to use to complain. I might as well use it to build. I'm about to complain about the table being scattered. Yes, sometimes I can mention it, but why don't I just get on with it rather than waiting for my spouse to come back from work or wherever he's gone to, and then I start picking on him, oh, you dropped your thing. Yeah, I can pick it up. It costs me nothing. My hands don't cut off because I picked it up. So please, that same strength you want to use to complain, to blame them, why don't you use it to do something productive? It might be a sign that you have a low self-esteem. Listen, another thing is when you're willing to just tolerate nonsense, when you're willing to always take the seed, no matter how negative it is, you're always willing. They slap you, you're fine. They insult you, you're okay. You never complain. You're fine with it. You have a low self-esteem. One of the things you can really help your spouse to achieve is how to treat another human being with dignity, first by respecting yourself and then demanding to be treated with dignity if required. There's nothing wrong with that. You should be able to tell your spouse, I'm sorry, I don't like what you said to me. I'm sorry, I don't like the way you treated me. You see, human relationship and human communication. I know we have a lot of people who are untrained and uncultured, But if you're married to somebody who constantly treats you with lack of dignity and respect, then it is right that you ask them, please, I don't like the way you're treating me. And if you're that person, you need to be willing to learn and respect your spouse's view. They have a right to teach you how to treat them with dignity, with respect. That's what makes us tick. That's what makes us feel loved when we are treated with dignity, when we're treated with honor. And it should be reciprocal. It shouldn't be one person treating the other like a king or the queen, and you're treating them like a servant or a maid. No, it should be mutual. And you would know if you're treating somebody with dignity, they would know. You can't claim that you're treating a person with respect and dignity and they don't know it. That's not true. Please and please check it. Are you treating your spouse with dignity? If you're not, then you need to stop it because it's actually detrimental and it will come back and haunt you in the end. It will lead to resentment, it will lead to hopelessness, it will lead to distrust and an eventual separation. We live in a world where there's a lot of noise about separation, about divorce. Some of the root causes actually are these issues: treating a person with lack of respect, treating a person as if they're lower than you. Please, let's stop this mess. It's a mess in today's world, and we can actually do something about it. When you can't express your emotions, it's also a sign that you have a low self-esteem. You're not happy, you can't say it. You always have to lie about how you feel. You always have to lie about where you're going. You always have to lie about your friends, about your association. It could be a sign that you have a low self-esteem. There's nothing as wonderful as being able to express yourself to your spouse. You're not happy, you should be able to tell them with respect, of course, and in love. Okay? So we should be able to express ourselves. That's one of the gifts of marriage. And then I'll stop here. Being too dependent on your spouse is also a sign that you lack a healthy a healthy esteem. You have a low self-esteem when you're always dependent on your spouse for everything. You can't get anything done. You always have to wait for them to come. You're so laid back and you think it's queening. It's actually not, because what you're doing is you're diminishing in your skills and your ability. If you're that kind of person who always wants your spouse to fix everything without you lifting a finger, it may look beautiful at the initial stage, but as you go on, you will find out that you're not developing yourself, even mentally, you're not being developed, you're not stretching because you have a low self-esteem. So that's one thing to check. I wanted to stop there, but there's also one point that is very important that I think is worth mentioning today. When you become so possessive of your spouse, you want to speak for them. You don't let them have a voice. You're very controlling of them, controlling of where they go, what they wear. But it may look as if you're macho. You're actually not. You have a low self-esteem. Nobody, even in marriage, is allowed to control the other. You can suggest to me, I can suggest to my spouse, but I don't enforce it on them. I don't say to them, you have to do it this way. No other way. You must do it this way. You must dress like this. You must have, no. It's actually wrong. So when you're very possessive of your spouse, it will affect your marriage negatively. And in the long run, the marriage will not stand. So your self-esteem can really do a lot of damage to your marriage. Maybe in the next video, we'll be talking about how a very good self-esteem can affect your marriage positively. So I'm going to stop here. It's Bolanle Oladejo. You can check us out on all social media platforms, The Couples Club on Instagram or Facebook. Reach out to us at thecouplesclub@gmail.com. If you need any counseling for you and your spouse, we can make our marriages work. And marriage indeed is beautiful. I'm Bolanle Oladejo. Take care now. God bless you.